So we ended with the Israel's conquest and dispersion by Assyria in 721. And part of what happened is Israel's 10 tribes disappeared among the other conquered peoples in the other part of the Assyrian Empire. The Israelites who remained in their land intermarried with foreigners that Assyria brought in. Their descendants are the Samaritans who live there to this day. And here we see the Samaritans with the Torah, so they share that in common with the Jewish people. They also celebrate Passover, and they really do sacrifice the Passover lamb. Although they do not have a temple anymore, they do use the Mount Gerizim as a place to worship. And there are maybe 700 people that are Samaritans living in Samaria to this day in modern Israel. So today we're going to look at first Isaiah, but we're going to look at the different parts of the book that we have in our Bible that we call the book of Isaiah. So first, Isaiah was a writer of chapters 1 through 39. He's sometimes called Isaiah of Jerusalem. And he pleaded with Judah's kings and people before the exile. He was from a well-educated, probably a priestly family. He groaned over Judah's unfaithfulness to God and corruption. He praised God's glory and majesty. And in these chapters, he prophesied the Messiah Emmanuel of the house of David and born of a virgin. Now, this is the call of Isaiah as a young man. So in his vision, he sees God in the temple. In the year King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord seated on a high and lofty throne, with the train of his garment filling the temple. Seraphim were stationed above. Each of them had 6 wings. With 2 they covered their faces, with 2 they covered their feet, and with 2 they hovered. One cried out to the other, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. All the earth is filled with his glory." Then one of the seraphim flew to me, holding an emper, which he had taken with tongs from the altar. He touched my mouth with it. "See," he said, "now that this has touched your lips, your wickedness is removed, your sin purged." Then I heard a voice of the Lord saying, "Whom shall I send? Who will go for us?" "Here I am," I said, "send me." So you see where the prayer, the holy, 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 sanctus, 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 comes from. The original words in Hebrew are kadosh, 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 repeated 3 times to indicate the perfection of God's holiness. In Isaiah chapter 7, Isaiah is talking to King Ahaz, the son of Uzziah. He has just murdered his own son as a sacrifice to Baal. Pretty bad stuff, no? And so he's a liar. When he acts humble, he's really hypocritical. Nevertheless, Isaiah promises something important through the prophet. God promises something important through the prophet Isaiah. "Therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. The young woman, or it could be virgin, pregnant and about to bear a son, shall name him Emmanuel." And so in the immediate context, this would be the son of Ahaz, one of the 8 good kings of Israel, Hezekiah. However, Isaiah is looking far into the future to the Messiah, the anointed one, who will be perfectly holy, which as Hezekiah is not. In some ways, he's a weak king, okay, although a good man. And these are the characteristics of the ideal Davidic king. "But a shoot shall sprout from the jump of Jesse, and from his roots a bud shall blossom. The Spirit of the Lord shall rest upon him, a spirit of wisdom and of understanding, a spirit of counsel and of strength, a spirit of knowledge and of fear of the Lord." Now, if you think you're looking at the 7 gifts of the Holy Spirit that we receive in confirmation, yes, because we too become anointed ones when we are baptized and confirmed and receive Holy Communion that we call the Eucharist. So we receive the indwelling life of the Blessed Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, when we receive the three sacraments of initiation. And here's an icon of Jesus Christ and his ancestors. So he comes from, he is the shoot that sprouts from the stump of Jesse. The second part of Isaiah, chapters 40 to 55, are called Second Isaiah. They're written by a group of writers in exile in Babylon. So they would be disciples of Isaiah. So this is a whole generation later. Because Isaiah is writing 100 years before the exile. It raised the Jewish people's hopes for the day they would make a joyous return to Jerusalem. The promise of a Messiah is another theme. That all nations should worship one God in justice and peace is yet another. The suffering servant who will bring salvation to all nations through his own suffering is seen in this section of Isaiah. There are 4 suffering servant songs, which we read during Lent. Like the suffering servant, Israel will itself bring healing to the nations through its suffering. Christians identify the suffering servant with Jesus Christ. And in this part of Isaiah, God is tender as a mother with her child. The third section of Isaiah is chapters 56 to 66, and it has a theme of a new dawn. It focuses on the conditions in Jerusalem after the return. It challenges the people to look deeper into the vision that inspired them to return, and there are going to be 3 major returns through Zerubbabel, Ezra, and Nehemiah. This section of Isaiah challenges the rich and leaders who are faithless and selfish. It challenges idol worship. True worship is justice and compassion for the poor. And Jesus quotes Isaiah chapter 61 in Luke. The idea of universalism appears. In other words, Jerusalem will become a light to all nations. So in these later scriptures, God is seen as the creator of the universe, the creator of the world, the father of all people, who calls all people to himself. He doesn't necessarily call all people to become Jews, but God does call him to the worship of himself, the one true God, and for people to renounce the many multiple gods and goddesses that are not a reflection of his glory in any way, and calling all people to justice and to compassion, to mercy. The prophet Micah lived at the same time as the prophet that we call first Isaiah. Micah is from a poor rural background, possibly a farm worker, like the farm workers, for example, who really provide us with food on our table. Here in the United States and around the world, our food is provided by working families, okay? He warns the people and the leaders of Judah, the southern kingdom, that they will be judged by God for their injustice to the poor. He speaks of universal peace and justice. He foretells a Messiah to be born in Bethlehem. And here is his warning to people who are not just. You plotters of iniquity, who work out evil on your beds. In the morning light you carry it out, for it lies within your power. You covet fields and seize them, houses and take them. You cheat owners of their houses, people of their inheritance. So he judges those who are wealthy and evil because their wealth is at the expense of other people. And he talks about peace. For from Zion shall go forth instruction, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. He shall judge between many peoples and set terms for strong and distant nations. They shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. One nation shall not raise the sword against another, nor shall they train for war again. They shall all sit under their own vines, under their own fig trees undisturbed. So he is denouncing war to conquer other people and to take away what they own, okay? To make them basically your slaves. Instead, he is saying, no, we need a justice, we need a peace built on justice. And so here you see a man hammering a sword into a plowshare. That blade cuts open the earth so people can plant the earth, either with seeds or with seedlings, and grow food. And this was something I saw growing up in the Philippine Islands, that until I was in 8th grade, and my family lived there, and every day on the way to school, I would see people up early in the morning. The sun would be rising, and I would be traveling about an hour into Manila to go to an American school. But I would see all around me people at work already with the morning sun, and they were plowing. And this is the messianic prophecy. But you, Bethlehem Ephrathah, least among the clans of Judah, from you shall come forth from me one who is to be ruler in Israel, whose origin is from of old, from ancient times. Therefore the Lord will give them up until the time when she was to give birth has born. Then the rest of his kindred shall return to the children of Israel. So the people will come back from exile. He shall take his place as shepherd by the strength of the Lord, by the majestic name of the Lord his God. And they shall dwell securely, for now his greatness shall reach to the ends of the earth. He shall be peace, he shall be shalom. And here we see the poor shepherds who are the first to visit the Christ child. You have been told, O mortal, what is good, and what the Lord requires of you, only to do justice, and to love good, and to walk humbly with your God. And here you see a water buffalo, and a farmer is plowing. So you can look back at the picture of the sculpture of the plowshare. The blade is forward. Here you see some young rice plants that have just been transplanted. People would take the seedlings. They've grown the seedlings and they plant them in the muddy water, which is rich and fertile, and then they are able to produce the delicious rice that many of us eat every day, including myself.